The field of 68 is set. Brackets in hand. Max and I will do some bracket picking starting tomorrow. But really, it's the Thursday, Friday, not before the first four, that is the most interesting. But in the first four, Howard, they're in the tournament. They won the MEAC. They play UMBC tomorrow night in Dayton for the right to play Michigan on Thursday night in the first round at 7:10. So the first of the first four games, Howard and UMBC. Miami of Ohio made it. I was skeptical of whether or not they would be included in the actual field of 64 versus having to play in a first four game, or that would actually be the field of 60 because 8 teams play in the first four to get it down to 64. But they did not survive the first four. They are playing SMU tomorrow night in the last of the first four games in Dayton. And SMU, Max, I'm sure you've seen this, is a 7.5-point favorite over 31-1 Miami of Ohio. That'll tell you right there what Miami of Ohio probably is as a team. SMU this year finishing 20-13 overall, 8-10 in the ACC. They're in their first four game as a 7.5-point favorite. But go Redhawks. That's their name. They used to be the Redskins years ago. They may have been the first to actually switch from Native American nicknames in college to something different. I could be wrong about that. Could have been Syracuse, could have been St. John's, could have been Stanford, could have been Miami of Ohio. If that's interesting to anybody, Max will look up the chronological order of when teams started to change their name from Native American nicknames to something else. But Miami of Ohio has been the Redhawks for a long, long time. But they were for, 100+ years, I'm guessing, the Redskins. Miami of Ohio being the cradle of coaches, football coaches. But they are a basketball school this year, and they will try to fight their way into the main draw in the final of the first four games. Good morning, everybody. There is some weather headed to us. This from you. You writes, you got to have camera on today. I mean, tornadoes, highest chance for tornadoes in years. I did reach out to Doug this morning. Doug's on his way back from Panama. I've heard Panama's awesome. I haven't been. I'm sure there's somebody out there listening that's been in recent years. Apparently, it is beautiful and a great vacation spot. So Cameron is on his way back from Panama. He'll be flying, I think, before the storms hit, although, man, did it rain this morning. But, yes, we have a very high-risk weather day, which, according to the weather people, this doesn't happen very often for us, where the conditions sort of come together for the mid-Atlantic to have an outbreak of tornadoes. We're not Tornado Alley, in the mid-Atlantic. We've had tornadoes here. Typically, they are an offshoot of like a severe thunderstorm, or if we have tropical weather, it's an offshoot of that. But the actual conditions that come together in the Midwest and the Southeast, every spring to produce tornado outbreaks that are very often incredibly tragic. We don't typically get that. But that's what we're in today. We are in a high risk for severe weather, which will include tornadic activity from basically the mid-Atlantic down through the Southeast this afternoon, this evening. Poor today. We'll see what happens. Stay tuned. This is one of those where you might want to turn your Capital Weather Gang update thing on. They're great at letting you know what's going on. See. Stay away from those old trees that, don't look healthy. We're not under a tornado watch yet, but a lot of the area just south and west of us is. Did you know that this weather was headed our way, Max? You seem to be oblivious to this stuff usually.
No, I mean, it depends. I was seeing a few things on my timeline here and there. probably at the start of this weekend, and it really didn't kind of raise my flags up until this morning, or I think last night when I saw the official kind of chart come out, or at least for what we're going to be looking like come for the rest of today.
The official chart.
Yeah, the official charts. So
yeah, the graphics.
Yes, exactly.
That indicated that DC Southeast is at high risk.
Yeah, big graphics guy.
All right. I did not watch the WBC game between the Dominican and the U.S., but I did see the highlights. It looked super exciting. I think these games have been, and it looked like the U.S. got the benefit of a couple of very favorable strike calls to go their way. But the U.S. is into the final after beating the Dominican 2-1. They will play the winner of, I guess, whatever time Italy and Venezuela play. Italy with a lot of Major League Baseball players with Italian last names. Not that they're not of Italian heritage, but I'm going to assume that many of them probably grew up in the Bronx or in Brooklyn or somewhere in New York, Philly, or somewhere else around the country. I've heard it's been exciting. I've just watched highlights. I've not been into the WBC. Watch the golf all weekend. Watch some of the college hoops this weekend. Man, that Vanderbilt team was good, but I'm now starting to think that the player that might be, let's just say, the fourth player selected in the NBA draft, that maybe if you end up with the fourth pick and you get Darius Aiyuk Jr. from Arkansas, that might be the guy. 30 points, 11 assists in the SEC final. He has been insanely good, including when he went for 49 in that double overtime loss about a month ago to Alabama in Tuscaloosa. But he had 37 last week in the early portion of the SEC tournament. This dude is so good. Darius Aiyuk Jr., another one of those freshmen, 6'3", 200 pounds, can just flat out score, but also is not a high turnover guy. He's, his assist to turnover ratio is super high. Let me just see what it is actually. 6-1 assist. I'm sorry, my fault. Just over 3-1. I was going to say 6-1 is insane. Just over 3-1 assist to turnover ratio. He's got the ball in his hands all the time. He is deadly from three. What did he shoot from three this year? 44.5% from behind the arc. Like, with all of the questions around Darren Peterson, AJ DeBonsa, love what a battler he is. It's going to be fun to watch him in the tournament. And then, look, Cam Boozer's a really good college player, and I don't doubt that he'll be a good NBA player. But when you're getting your shot blocked, by guys over and over again at the college level when you approach the rim, how do you think that's going to play out in the NBA? That UVA Duke final was insane. How about Virginia with their block shots? The dude number 33, Onyenso, 9 block shots he had in the ACC final against Duke. UVA's good. Odom's a good coach. He's a really good coach. That was a winnable game for Virginia. Their defense was outstanding. They held Duke to, under, I think it was 37% from the floor, something like that. 12 block shots total in the game. This guy, number 33 for Virginia, if you haven't seen him play, he's a 7-foot, 250-pounder from Nigeria. He's averaging 3 block shots a game. Averaging 3 block shots a game. He had 8 in the quarterfinal win over NC State on Thursday night, 4 in their semifinal blowout win over Miami, and he had 9 block shots in the ACC championship game. He set a record, obviously, with 21 block shots over 3 games for block shots in an ACC tournament. I mean, the ball just kept getting thrown back over and over again. And Cam Boozer's a good player, really good player. He was 3 for 17 in the ACC championship game. I'm going to guess 3 of those shots minimum were thrown back in the other direction. He couldn't finish against Florida State the other night, couldn't finish against Carolina. I like him, and I love the fact that he can really stretch the floor. He's competitive as hell, He's just not a first pick in an NBA draft. He's not a transcendent talent. He's definitely a lottery pick. He's definitely a top 10 pick. But, man, if you've watched Duke at all, and I just started watching about a month ago, he's been just rejected in the paint over and over again. When that's happening in college, you know it's going to happen in the NBA. First glance at the bracket, my personal view, even though Vanderbilt beat them the other day, is I really like Florida. I think Florida's got a really good chance to defend their title. I also am going to be rooting very much for Purdue and Matt Painter. He's been in a final, obviously. This is a coach that just has, during the course of his career, and they beat Michigan in the Big Ten final, super impressive in doing so. This is a coach that, to me, has consistently gotten more out of less during his career. By the way, thank God the committee, for the first time it seems like in a few years, took championship week and championship weekend into consideration a little bit. You know, last year Michigan won and didn't really get the benefit after beating it was Maryland, Wisconsin, and Purdue, I think, in 3 straight days. And this year Purdue got the benefit of knocking off Michigan in the final and elevating from the 3 line to the 2 line. They play Queens in the first round of the tournament. Was unfamiliar with Queens. At first, I thought it was Queens College, but I believe it might be a school in North Carolina. Not exactly sure. I like Florida. I'm rooting for Purdue. Those are really the initial thoughts for me. I'm glad Miami of Ohio got in. Wish they would have been in the main draw. Happy to see Howard play tomorrow night. Let's get them into the main draw. They'd have to face Michigan. That would not make a lot of sense. There are a couple of teams that I think are interesting right now because of the way they're playing heading into the tournament. It doesn't always translate, that's for sure. But I think St. John's is an interesting team. I think TCU's an interesting team. And I think what was the other one that I had here? The other team that, well, Virginia's playing awfully well, but there was another team that I really liked that I watched over the last couple of weeks. UCLA. Now, they got an injury. We'll see if the injured player that they lost in their quarterfinal win over Michigan State, man, that was a good win for UCLA. But this kid, Donovan Dent, they've got some players at UCLA. And Mick Cronin, for as insufferable as he can be with the media, dude can flat out coach. And they have been playing very good basketball, but they lost a key player in that quarterfinal game. We'll see whether or not his availability is there. They ended up losing to Purdue in a pretty interesting semifinal game, but UCLA had won 6 of 7 down the stretch and had really been playing well. But Bilodeau, their 6'9" 4 got hurt against Michigan State. We'll see if he can play. If he can, keep an eye on the Bruins this tournament because they have played well. Cronin, by the way, at halftime of the Michigan State game, see if you can find this audio, Max. I didn't ask you to get it before the show, but Mick Cronin, the head coach of UCLA, in the quarterfinal game, heading into halftime, being interviewed by Andy Katz in a game in which, you know, they were playing well and they had a lead, but he basically said, you know, it's kind of hard playing, 5 against 8. I know I'm not a Hall of Fame coach yet, but we're trying like hell. Like, he's just so condescending all the time and just totally, every single game in the Big Ten for him has been a complaint about the officiating or the travel, which they have a lot of it. When you're on the West Coast in the Big Ten, you've got a lot of travel. So does everybody else because they got to go out there. But they ended up winning that game 88-84. And look out for UCLA if they're healthy. That's the one thing I would say is if they get their 6'9", 240-pound kid back, they could be a dangerous team. Of course, over the weekend, since we last spoke, lots of football news. They continue to be active. We said, I think, on Friday, man, it seems like pretty much everything starts to happen in the mid to late afternoon, early evening hours. And it did again on Friday. 2 wide receiver additions, another running back addition over the weekend. We'll get to all of that and more. On the show today, Ben Standing at 12. Patrick Stevens will jump on with us to talk brackets at 11:40. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com.
Second down, they blitz again. Daniels, though, has some time. Lets it rip, floating it deep down the field, going for Brown. He's got it! A perfect throw to De'Ami Brown! Wow!
Dan Marino told me, you can't guard a perfect throw. How does he see that ball? Kirby's got his hand in his face, and Brown continues to shine in the playoffs. Great last week, and he's just making more explosive plays today.
Yeah, it was more than just that catch. Do you remember that one Detroit playoff game, end of 2024? Seems like forever ago, but they did beat the Lions, the 1 seed on the road, to advance to the NFC Championship game 45-31. That throw was a just absolute drop in the bucket dime from Jaden to De'Ami Brown at the end of the first half. They were up 24-21. A few plays later, they were in the end zone for a 31-21 halftime lead. That game was insane in the first half. That was, for me, 2024. Hail Mary, Philly comeback, Tampa Bay doink. The Lions game, to me, was the one in which it was like, wow, we're good and we're back. And when I say we're back, you had to be, in your 40s minimum to even understand what that meant. De'Ami Brown had 6 catches for 98 yards in that game. And not only did he make that catch, which was a perfect throw, what Brady missed on, and they, eventually got it with the replays, Kirby Joseph was ripping his face mask in the process. De'Ami Brown is back in the fold for Washington. They had an active weekend. Since we last were together on Friday, they added De'Ami Brown. Remember, 1 year, $10 million. Now he's back here on a 1 year reported $3 million deal. More on him in a moment. They added Van Jefferson. Several of you reminded me that I actually threw Van Jefferson's name out on Friday's show. I did not know anything. It was just Ben and I looking through the wide receiver free agent list. And I said he'd be a good ad. Jerome Ford running back in, and Chris Paul is back. He tested free agency the first week of it anyway. Obviously wasn't going to get what he and his agent thought they might get. And he has come back on a 1 year deal to play in Washington. Maybe, I would think, starting next to Laramie Tunsil on that left side. So there solves the guard problem that we thought we had. The center problem has not been solved. More on that coming up. They lost Noah I off to Seattle, Josh Johnson off to Cincinnati over the weekend. If you're wondering and trying to keep up with the players that, were free agents here that have now signed elsewhere. That list is Tyler Biotish, obviously cut before free agency began with the Chargers, Jake Martin in Tennessee, Chris Rodriguez in Jacksonville, Jonathan Jones in Philadelphia. That may have happened after the show on Friday, I forget. Noah Igbenogany to Seattle, and Josh Johnson to Cincinnati. Those three, the last, signed 1 year deals. Rodriguez and Martin, 2 year deals, and Biotish, a reported 3 year deal, even though we don't know the actual details. I think that'll be interesting to see how much of that deal is guaranteed. I'm going to guess that 2 years are guaranteed. That's my guess on the Biotish deal. But if it was more than 2 years, again, I'll go back, and we'll have time to go back and be critical of Washington perhaps not trying to extract something for the loss of Tyler Biotish. All right, De'Ami Brown back. So let me just start off with this. Adding De'Ami Brown and Van Jefferson does not answer the number 2 wide receiver issue. They still have to find another wide receiver that's a legitimate 1A or 2. I still think that guy is Brandon Aiyuk if, they certify he's not crazy. B, he's physically healthy. And C, he gets released, because you're not trading for his contract. You're going to wait for him to get released, and then you're going to sign him to a prove-it deal. That's my guess. That seems to be the way it should go. So this does not, solve that issue. They needed wide receivers, after, last week, you're talking about still under contract, Before Friday, under contract, Washington had Terry McLaurin, they had Traylon Burks, Luke McCaffrey, and Jalen Lane under contract. Now you have De'Ami Brown and Van Jefferson added to the list. Yes, they still have guys like Ja'Cory Brooks from last year and Jacoby Jones from last year. Those guys are still, technically under their rookie deals or, contracts that they signed. And I forget, if Chris Moore was on injured reserve at the end of the year. But in terms of real receivers, McLaurin, Burks, McCaffrey, Lane, Brown, and Jefferson, you're still looking for another. For De'Ami, man, look, he was good for us at the end of that season. He really came on. That was his kind of breakout, at the end of 24 and then through the postseason. Last year in Jacksonville, he caught just 20 passes for 227 yards and a touchdown. He was a healthy scratch twice near the end of the regular season for a game. And then in the playoff game against Buffalo, he was not active and he wasn't hurt. He had completely fallen out of favor with Liam Cohen and the Jacksonville staff. Barely played. He had one catch total as a healthy player in the final 8 games of the season. But look, we know what his capability is, and Jacksonville thought they were getting that player. That's why they signed him to a 1-year, $10 million deal. And that was the reason De'Ami didn't come back to Washington, is because Adam Peters looked at it and said, whoa, 1 year, $10 million, take it. Absolutely take it. You'd be crazy not to, because we're certainly not going to offer you 1 year, $10 million for basically, a 5 or a 6 game output towards the end of the season. He had 30 catches total in 2024's regular season, but more than half of those catches in 2024 came over the final 5 games of the regular season. And then in the playoffs, obviously the 3 playoff games, 14 catches, 229 yards, and then had a touchdown in that first playoff win in Tampa, and then had that incredible throw / over-the-shoulder catch to lead to a touchdown in the first half against Detroit in the playoff game. I did note one thing, and I didn't know this during the regular season. He returned like 4 or 5 kickoffs during the course of the year and averaged over 26 yards per kickoff return. So they started to try to find other ways to use De'Ami. I don't know, with the new rules, obviously, and more kickoff returns now a part of it, he could be a part of that mix on the team next year. But again, De'Ami being back, there's definitely, I think, a spot on the roster for him. Whereas with Van Jefferson, I think there's a spot on the roster for him too, but it's also not inconceivable that he wouldn't be on the opening day roster in in the early portion of the season of 2026. I just think that this is, they're adding people to the roster at that position. They're adding experience to the roster at that position. They're adding players that can play, certainly, to that position. And it's in part a bit of an insurance policy on what they may or may not get over the next, few weeks and few months. The Van Jefferson thing is interesting to me, because the reason I even mentioned him the other day with Ben when we were just kind of running through the available wide receiver free agents is I've always kind of been a fan of his going back to Florida. I always thought he played big. He played big in big games, but he also played physically bigger than he was. He's listed at 6'1". He always looked bigger than that, the way he played. In those years with the Rams, he had some moments, man. Got drafted by Sean McVay and the Rams in 2020, had his best season the year they went to the Super Bowl and beat the Bengals. In 2021, Van Jefferson had 50 catches, 802 yards, 6 touchdowns. He's played in 7 playoff games, 6 in LA. Of course, they won the Super Bowl in 2021, and he played in a playoff game a few years ago when Russell Wilson was the quarterback for the Steelers, one of those Tomlin teams that overachieved and lost to Baltimore. Actually caught a touchdown pass in that playoff loss to Baltimore. He was in a game I'll never forget, because I had the Rams plus the points in a playoff game during COVID 2020 at Lambeau. And he was the go-to guy that day as a rookie for Jared Goff at Lambeau. But He never really became that guy for Matt Stafford. Why? Well, they had Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp had 145 catches, second greatest season reception-wise in NFL history in 2021. And remember, Van Jefferson was, good enough, but they wanted better, and they went out and got Odell Beckham Jr. during that Super Bowl run. And he had the huge finish to the season and the huge postseason before he got injured in that Super Bowl win. Jefferson played in Tennessee this past season, 29 catches for 350 yards. So, even in lesser roles, lesser positions, he's been able to produce. And here's the thing about Van Jefferson, he'll block. We had who did we have on the show recently in talking about Aiyuk? Oh, Dante Whitner. Whitner said, you don't play for Kyle Shanahan at wide receiver if you don't block. Same goes for Sean McVay. You don't play for Sean McVay at wide receiver if you don't block. Van Jefferson's a good blocker as well. I'm sure that's part of what they liked about him. Plus, he's been in an offense, somewhat similar to the one that they might be running. But two players from Tennessee now off that terrible team, Chig Okonkwo and Van Jefferson. But Jefferson certainly is not a lock to, make the team depending on what else they do. Again, I think both of the deals they did on Friday don't prevent anything from happening in the future, whether it's Aiyuk or whether it's Carnell Tate or somebody in the draft. They needed bodies. Terry, Burks, McCaffrey, and Lane were the receivers under contract. Now you add De'Ami Brown and Van Jefferson to that list. It's, by the way, if you just look at like the roster right now at wide receiver, it kind of looks like 2024 with one exception. You don't have, Zacchaeus or Crowder, as kind of slot receivers. You're still missing that piece. Maybe it's somebody, maybe it's McCaffrey, maybe it's Lane, who knows? But like if they didn't add anything else, Burks, Jefferson, they're kind of like Noah Brown. I mean, they would be hoping that they're kind of like Noah Brown. De'Ami's back playing the role of De'Ami. Also, one thing to consider, I know we've talked about this. I know Ben and I have talked about it, but with Blau, there's a very good possibility we're going to see a lot more 12 and 13 personnel. A lot more one back, two tight end, one back, three tight end sets. So your need for more receivers isn't as great as your need for tight ends. And obviously with Okonkwo and Bates and Sinnott, and we'll see what else happens at that position, expect those three to play a lot, in 2026. I think we're going to see a lot of Okonkwo, Sinnott, and Bates, all three of them. But minus the slot answer, the Zacchaeus answer, the Crowder answer from 2024, right now what they have looks kind of similar. But again, stay tuned because I think, there's still some movement there. Then they added on Saturday, I think it was, they added another running back. They added Rashad White on late Thursday, and they added Jerome Ford on late Friday or early Saturday. Jerome Ford has been one of those backs too that's been in the league, and he's played obviously with bad teams, a bad team in Cleveland. But every time he's had opportunities, he's looked good running the football. He's looked very good running the football. In the last couple of years, the Stefanski scheme and system, again, kind of off the Kubiak, Shanahan. Blau has some of that influence, has obviously the Ben Johnson influence. So Ford, I was looking at his numbers on Saturday, and it didn't surprise me that he averaged 5.4 yards per carry last year and then 4 yards per carry in 2023. He rushed for 813 yards on that 2023 Cleveland team that actually went to the playoffs with Joe Flacco at quarterback. It's interesting. I mean, like you would not think of Cleveland as like a playoff team, but they did go 11-6 that one season, and they advanced to the playoffs. A lot of the players that Washington has added, they fit the profile of younger, hungry, high motor, highly competitive. They they also fit the playoff experience mode. I mean, Oweh was just in the playoffs. Chanel's got Super Bowls, plural. Tim Settle's played on good football teams during the last few years. Robertson's been in Detroit. Chason just played in the Super Bowl. Omenahue from Kansas City, obviously the experience there. Van Jefferson's played in a bunch of playoff games. Rashad White's played in a bunch of playoff games. And even Jerome Ford played in the playoffs with the Cleveland Browns in 2023 when they went to Houston, by the way, after what was really a thrilling season in 2023 for them. Came out of nowhere. They signed Joe Flacco, remember, at some point to replace Deshaun Watson and the kid from UCLA, who was not a rookie at that point, but was like a second-year player. But and then Flacco took him on this incredible run towards the end of the season. They won, a bunch of miracle games, and they ended up losing in the postseason, but people thought they had a shot. But Kareem Hunt and Jerome Ford were the two key backs, and they kind of shared a lot of what happened that particular year. Again, in 2023 for the Browns, 813 rushing yards, averaged 4 yards per carry, and caught 37 passes that year. So does, Jerome Ford and Rashad White mean no Jeremiah Love? No. Do Van Jefferson and De'Ami Brown mean no Brandon Aiyuk? No. Does Chigakonkwo mean, no more tight ends? No. None of what they've done means or excludes anything from happening, in my opinion. No matter how active they've been defensively. Look at some of the contracts. I mean, you're talking about Chason signed a 1-year deal. Omenahue, a 1-year deal. Defensively, Nick Cross is a 2-year deal. Robertson's a 2-year deal. Now, Settle signed a 3-year deal. Chanel signed a 3-year deal. And Oweh signed a 4-year deal. So they've been active and more money and more players, etc. But nothing prevents them from taking David Bailey or Reuben Bain or Jeremiah Love or Carnell Tate. I think everything they've done in free agency opens up the possibility of them doing anything at that pick. And even though it shouldn't drive the decision to take best player available in terms of how many needs you have, they're now in position certainly to take the best player available at 7 in the draft. All right, so here we are 1 week after we started, because it was about 1 week ago when yours truly and Max started to hype the 12 noon kickoff to free agency. We hyped it so much that 5 minutes into it, people were killing Adam Peters for not having signed 17 players in the first 20 minutes. But what a week it was. I mean, what's the total number of players? 6, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15 players have been added to the roster. And in terms of new players, 12 new players. Paul, Trent Scott, and Marcus Mariota are the 3 that are back. 15 new, 15 total, 12 new. They are at the top of the list, in the top 3. It's a dynamic list because it's changing all the time. But in terms of free agency dollars spent, top 3, new players added, top 3. What I want to know from you at 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980, when we look back on this free agency period, what was the most significant signing? What was the one that Adam Peters absolutely nailed? Your gut on that when we come back, 301-230-0980. I'll give you mine. Max will give you his as well. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. According to Spot Track, Washington has spent the third most in overall contract value in free agency at $231,260,000 in total contract value. Third behind Tennessee at 1, Vegas at 2. In terms of the new players, overall contracts 15, but the new players 12, they're number 1. In terms of the number of new players acquired, Washington's acquired 12 new players. That's tops in the league. The new players are Adafe Owe, Chiga Okonkwo, Leo Chenal, Tim Settle, Amik Robertson, Nick Cross, Chason Omenihue, De'Ami Brown is new, Van Jefferson, Jerome Ford, Rashad White, the 3 players that have been re-signed by the team during the free agency period. Once free agency began, Marcus Mariota, Trent Scott, and now Chris Paul back in the fold. So of those 15 moves, all right, the 3 in which they brought back their own players and the 12 new players signed, what's the move that you feel most confident in? You're going to be able to say sooner rather than later, man, Adam Peters nailed it on him. So for me, I'll tell you, this isn't going to be my answer, but I considered Marcus Mariota as a potential answer to this because all of this stuff is great. The draft will be fun. This is fun. This is let's see what they get. Let's see who's out there. Let's debate whether or not it was the right guy or the right contract. But the most important thing, and we spent years in the wilderness trying to solve the problem, but the most important thing they have a starting high-level, potential elite-level quarterback. And all of this stuff is great, and it's supportive of that. But without that, you'd be in big trouble. Big trouble. His health, playing 17 games at the level he played at in 2024, will determine the season they have in 2026 more than any of the other stuff that's gone on. The other stuff's important. I'm not saying it isn't. I'm not saying it's meaningless. It's, of course, important, and it's important that they get it right, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Because without significant improvement defensively, there's only so much Jaden can do. Because what he did in 2024 is aberration. That level of Superman performance with the defense they had and the supporting cast he had, you can't count on that. You can count on that to make sure that you're a competitive football team, that you win more games than you lose, but not make it to the NFC Championship game with 12 regular season wins. You can't expect that without improving the roster. Now, the part of this that we don't know is we don't know if they did improve the roster. We can debate it right now, but there are always the questions of scheme, fit, desire, what happens when they get the money, all those different things. You got to trust that this group, in terms of understanding the psychological profile of these players, they've gotten that more right than wrong since they started this in 2024. So Marcus Mariota is critical because if you lose Jaden for a couple of games, you've got to have a competent answer. And we saw that he's competent. I say that he was competent in the Kingsbury scheme, Kingsbury offense. I don't think Marcus Mariota is going to be any less, but it was really as good as he's looked since some of those early days in Tennessee with Arthur Smith. So number one for me is definitely the guy that they signed second on Monday afternoon, and that's Adafe Owe. I was a fan of the player, the way he played down the stretch for the Chargers, the way he really impacted the playoff game for the Chargers in Foxborough. If they had any kind of offense in that game, just like if Houston had had any kind of responsible offense in the game in Foxborough, I don't think New England ever makes it to the Super Bowl, especially against the Texans. But that Charger defense, led by Adafe Owe, kept them in the game. He had 3 sacks and 2 forced fumbles in the game. I mean, he was arguably one of the top 2 or 3 players in the game. And they needed somebody like him. And he looks the part. The kind of taller, longer, angular, relentless, high motor. I know that Vinny Serrato, as a Ravens guy now, doing a Baltimore show, was on with us last week, said he really likes Oweh and likes his motor and likes his athleticism, but he doesn't think he's got enough bend, need a little bit more bend. We'll see. I mean, he is, right now in that mode of entering that 27 to 30-year-old portion of his career where he either develops into a monster and into a really, really good player and starts earning some of those Pro Bowl votes and All-Pro votes. And I think there's a chance he might. He's the guy that I think we're going to absolutely feel like, wow, okay, 4 years, $100 million, 68 guaranteed. It needs to equal double digits in sacks every single year. It needs to equal a number of deflections, a number of forced fumbles on strip sacks. And I think we're going to get that from him. That's my number one. The Mariota thing was super important, though. Super important. I love Chig. Loved him before free agency. Started talking about him right when we first started talking about free agency. Love Chenal. I think he's a fit. I'm actually more excited about Nick Cross than maybe I was before they signed him. But always the guy that I think has a chance. And the money would reflect it. The kind of deal he got would reflect this. I think he's got a chance to make this defense certainly improved and make Adam Peters and company look good. Who's the guy that you feel strongest about, Max, in terms of what they've done so far?
So real quick, before I give you my answer, and this is going to be on the defensive side of the ball, we have some news on the offensive side of the ball. Per John Keim, crediting Adam Schefter, running back Jeremy McNichols is returning to Washington on a one-year deal. Big fan. And we were talking about this before the show. I really kind of expected to see him back in a Commander's uniform because I know how much they like him. And he just does it all. So big fan of him returning.
McNichols has been to listen to, the coaches and to listen to Dan Quinn in particular talk about Jeremy McNichols over these 2 seasons, they just love him. They absolutely love him as a person. They love him in the locker room. He is a jack of all trades, master of none, sure, but he's had moments carrying the football. He's certainly had moments on special teams. They felt more comfortable with him at times, without question. Without Eckler in the lineup, they felt more comfortable with him than Bill or Rodriguez in pass pro. By the way, that's something that they're going to be getting, I think, in spades with Rachaad White, a guy who can definitely, high IQ, can definitely help protect the quarterback. But I expected that to happen. We talked about that many times, and I'm just looking at the other, free agents on their list. So with McNichols back in the fold, of the rest of at this point, Debo, Bobby Wagner, Zach Ertz, Eckler, Von Miller. I thought Eddie Goldman was a possibility before they signed Settle. That may be it. That could be it. That could be the last one from the list of players that played for them last year who are now unrestricted free agents. By the way, Debo, Wagner, Ertz, always, there was some of you were like, man, this really is a tell that none of our own players have been signed. None of our own players were wave one free agency guys. There may have been a thought that Chris Paul was. He obviously tested the market, didn't get what he wanted. He's coming back. But Debo Samuel, Bobby Wagner, Zach Ertz, at their ages, Von Miller, Austin Eckler, these are wave 2, wave 3. I mean, we're talking about over the next 30 days, before the draft. Yes, you could see something happening with them, or maybe even after the draft. They were not going to be first week guys anyway. Now, that does speak to the level of talent that they did not have on the roster. That's for sure, too. All right, everybody on hold, stay there. Give me the one new guy or returning guy. We now have 16 total, 12 new, 4 returning. Give me the one guy that you think Adam Peters is going to look best for bringing into the fold for 2026. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, the team980.com. I do want you to know that if you've got any HVAC needs, Foley Mechanical is the place to go. We were having some issues about a year ago. Reached out to Foley Mechanical. Dan Foley himself, he owns it. No private equity firm. He owns 100% of the company. He came out, dealt with me, my wife, sized up the problem, had a team of people. They're super professional, very skilled. He controls the quality because he owns the company. He controls the equipment to the people he hires, and he's got a great team. They took care of the issue. Foley Mechanical takes care of it for you if you've got an HVAC issue. They are full service, heating, air conditioning, hot water, and boilers. And they're the go-to for older homes with radiator heat, which is a real specialty. They work across the DMV, DC, Maryland, and Virginia, and they proudly install Amana HVAC equipment. If your system needs help or you just want it done right, I trust me, that Foley Mechanical will get it done. Call Foley Mechanical, go to FoleyMechanical.com and tell Dan that I sent you. Patrick Stevens will jump on with us at 11:40. We'll talk about the bracket, talk about, some of the committee whiffs. I didn't think there were many. By the way, the committee chair, the guy Keith Gill, I think he's the Sun Belt commissioner. He was about as good as I have seen in terms of being an interview post the bracket, whether it's been in football or in basketball, in years. Guys, clear, concise, had the right answers that made sense. Sometimes it's just in your ability to communicate, because it's been a disaster, it seems like, in recent years with the unveiling of the football field and the basketball field. But I was very impressed with him on the CBS pairing show last night. So Patrick Stevens will join us at 11:40, and then Ben will join us at 12. Washington has signed to a one-year deal Jeremy McNichols today. So add him to Chris Paul over the weekend in case you missed that. Jeremy Ford over the weekend if you missed that at running back, and then De'Ami Brown and Van Jefferson since our last show on Friday. So they continue to be active. The question that I'm asking here at 301-230-0980 is, which of the moves do you like the best? Which of the moves do you feel confident are going to be moves that we look back a year, 2, 3 years from now and say, he nailed it. AP cooked and got it right. It tasted great. And we're talking about really now of the 16 players since last Monday at 12 noon, 12 new, 4 returning. For me, it's Oweh. For you, Max, it is.
So for me, it's kind of between two guys. One thing that Adam Peters is doing really well right now is, at least in my opinion, is building the depth of a room that we saw how paper thin it was last year, and that's the edge spot. So I really like these one-year deals that he's gotten Caleb Von Chason and Charles Omenihu to sign, because bringing in those guys to hopefully add to the depth, or at least keep guys like Dorrance Armstrong and Dietrich Wise a little bit, like, they don't have too much on their plate. So I think that Peters has done a really good job at building out the depth, and that's what I think he deserves a lot of credit for right now.
I'm excited about the return of Marcus Mariota and Chris Paul. I'm really excited about Chigakonkwo. I think Leo Chenal and Nick Cross both have a chance to be major, difference makers. I think with Chenal in particular, that gives Frankie Louvu a chance to kind of look like he was the player, that looked like the player that he was in 2024. There's a lot to feel good about. They clearly address needs with upgrades. The issue is, how big of an upgrade, and what does it look like with a new defensive coordinator and his new defensive scheme? Going to be hard to guess on that until we see it in real games. Let's start with Bob in Rockville. Bob, give me your number one move by the team so far.
I think it's the linebacker out of Kansas City, Leo Chenal.
Yeah.
He's played for winners. He's been there at the right spot at the right moment. He's a homer. I'm just saying, he stays home and plays his position and does his job. Love his special team play. I told Matt earlier, he's going to block that punter kick this year.
Yeah, you got to have. He's got a couple of big block field goals.
Yes, he lines up in the right spot, Kevin. That's what I'm talking about. It hard-nosed player. Shocked that Kansas City let him go. They must not have the money. Yeah. The other thing I love is I love the McNichols signing. When he's on the field, he produces, Kevin. You get more juice out of him than any player we had the last 2 years on the field when he plays. Happy St. Patrick's Day, Kevin. Love the show.
Yeah, you too, Bob. You too, Bob. Let's go to Jalen in Richmond. Jalen, go ahead.
Good morning, Kevin.
What's up, Jalen?
So I'm most confident in Leo Chenal. He's a young guy. He's 25. He's durable. He's only missed 3 games in his 4-year career. He's a 2-time Super Bowl champion. As you've alluded to early on, he has a ton of experience, along with so many other guys who we recently signed. And according to Next Gen Stats, I saw that he has the lowest missed tackle rate among linebackers since 2023, which I think is major. So the combination of his short tackling and his athleticism in my opinion, will be a game changer in the middle of our defense, because I feel like once he's in space, he can get to the ball. And we haven't had guys or a linebacker who can make plays in space and get to the ball like he has the potential of doing in a long time. So just the prospect of him being in that position and just being the backbone of the foundation to Durante Jones's defense is just exciting to me. And his impact is going to be very visible right away, especially if he's in the middle of that defense and he can open it up for Frankie Louisville. He can open it up for the back end, the front end. I feel like the linebacking core is going to be basically the backbone of our defense, and whether or not we can, take it to the next level. So having him on the roster, in my opinion, and just the potential that he has is going to be evident, and I'm confident in his capability and what he can bring. So thank you for taking my call.
Sure. I think, you mentioned something that's really important too, because Nick Cross, I think, fits into that category as well in terms of sure tacklers. Chenal, Cross, in terms of some of the box players, and expect Nick Cross to play a lot of strong safety and in the box. These are really good tacklers, and they didn't tackle well last year. Part of the problem is you got to be near the ball to be able to tackle it. They weren't near the ball enough last year to tackle it enough. But, if Bobby Wagner leaves, they're actually losing maybe the best in the box tackler in the league, even at his age last year. Let's go to Mark in Largo. Mark, your favorite player so far in free agency, the one that you think will make Adam Peters look really good, is who?
Chig. I can't say Chig's last name. It's Chig.
Conquo.
I think Chig will – Conquo. I think he will be all-pro, and I think he will make Jaden the MVP this year. I also think, and that's one side. That's one position. Here's the other thing, too. Bringing Diami and Van Jefferson back. This may not be the best receiving core Jaden has had, but I will tell you this. He won't have to worry about these guys getting away from separating from their defenders. Which brings me to 3. Ben Sinnott, Luke McCaffrey. I will be concerned. I would really be concerned that people have been saying all last few days, like Grant Paulson, these are just guys who are just going to be here. They're not going to make it. No, Diami Brown can get over. Outside of Jaden and Terry McLaurin, we all remember Diami Brown was that third dude that made things happen in that playoff run. Diami can get open, and don't sleep on Traylon Burks. Traylon Burks, I'm telling you, is going to be the 50-50 guy. That's going to be the sleeper to everybody. Now, they can get Brandon Aiyuk in. I don't know, to be honest with you, if they really need him. Now, a lot of people say that's blasphemy to say. Traylon Burks, I'm telling you, is going to be the biggest steal out of everything that Adam Peters has done in this past 2 years.
Okay.
Trust me on that. Offensively, I think this team will put up 35 to 40 points.
So if Traylon Burks had been signed right after free agency began, would he be your number one? Because I didn't give you the option of picking him.
Well, from last year, probably not.
That was a lot of wells.
The mere fact that they re-signed him, and I think they could stretch him out. This is why I'm not so sure they can go after. I mean, they may not. Brandon Aiyuk is great. Don't get me wrong. I'm telling you, Traylon Burks does not have a lot of miles on his tires.
Well, of course not. Look, Mark.
You got
okay. Let me. Chig was your first choice, and by the way, it's a great choice. I don't know if he's going to be the guy that makes Jaden Daniels the MVP, because I think Jaden can handle that on his own. But I love Chig Okonkwo. I wanted him more than Pitts before Pitts got franchise tagged. So I'm very excited about him, and I expect him to have a major breakout year. In terms of becoming one of the tight ends that the league talks about in terms of production. In terms of the best receiving core, it's not much to compare it to. In terms of they don't need anything else, that's where, I got to draw the line with you. They need another true separating, fear-inducing to a defense wide receiver. Brandon Aiyuk in 2023, unbelievable separation, unbelievable receiver that year. If they get that player, that's going to be the piece. If they get that player, A healthy, sane 2023 version of Brandon Aiyuk, you have 2 number ones on your team. And you've now put together a starting receiving pair that rivals top 5 in the league in McLaurin and Aiyuk. Now, they won't get that pre-season, recognition because there will be a big mystery and a big question mark around Aiyuk. And by the way, that assumes Aiyuk lands here. They may just decide after, hearing the stories and maybe even talking to him, yeah, we're not putting that level of nuts in our locker room. I don't know. I mean, maybe he's not. But if you got him from 2023, that's so much better than what you currently have and what you currently had with Diami and Van Jefferson. And I've always liked Van Jefferson. I've always thought that he was almost a bit underrated, in the places he was. But no, they're Van Jefferson and Diami Brown and anybody else they have, that they don't rival what Aiyuk was in 2023. They're not top 10 receivers. Aiyuk is, if you get the version of the one that we saw at the end of 2023. Let's go to Little in Bowie. Little, go ahead.
What's up, Coach?
What's up, Little? How you doing?
Matt. Everybody stole my thunder, Coach. I like the linebacker out of Kansas City.
Sheehan.
But I'm gonna tell you what, that running back that I saw tape on from Cleveland, he run north and south. And I'm gonna make a statement real quick there, Coach, before I get off the line. Now that linebacker we broke from Kansas City, Young Buck, kind of rubbing JYD a kind of way. I hear it in your voice, JYD. Yeah.
Who are you talking about? Sorry.
Like
Sometimes
talking about Chanel.
You're talking about Chanel again. Okay.
JYD, and no matter who, because JYD's a big Chiefs guy.
He said,
Okay.
He said loud and clear we had to come to Kansas City to come to a winner to get him. But guess what? JYD, Kansas City, your shiny toy didn't have enough money to keep him in the pocket. So now we got the young buck. And guess what, Kevin? I got him making the Pro Bowl. His first starting as a position at that linebacker. Mike, I hope they put him in the Mike linebacker. I got him making the Pro Bowl coming from the Commanders. You heard it from Little, 2026.
Leo Chenal. We got an overwhelming Leo Chenal being everybody's favorite pick. I think that's interesting because I think before free agency, when it came to that position, it was guys like Lloyd and Nakobe Dean and Quay Walker. There was, if you were really into the depths of sort of the tiers of off-ball linebackers, you knew Chenal was available. But I think Chenal, the highlight reel on Chenal is so impressive. His interviews last week, he came on with us on Friday, right? He's really very, very interesting. By the way, one of 16. He's got 15 siblings. He's got 7 brothers and 8 sisters. Who's your favorite new ad or old ad brought back? Gary in Upper Marlboro. Gary, go ahead.
Hi, Kevin.
What's up,
great
Gary?
to be on your show again. Listen, I'm going in a different direction. I love the Rachaad White pick. Okay, I think he was underutilized in Tampa Bay. He's got great hands. I really like him as a pickup. I also like the kid from Cross from Indianapolis. So it's a crapshoot between those two. I got to be honest with you, Kevin. I think all the other guys on the defense are vastly overrated, including Owe. People have to understand that Baltimore was ready to cut him, okay, after 5 games until they found a trade partner. Right. All right. This guy was on his way of being a journeyman. He had some good games with the Chargers. But before that, he was deemed a bust. And not even 7 months later, he's got a $100 million contract.
Well,
okay?
he did have 10 sacks in 2024.
He did.
Yeah.
He did have 10 sacks in 2024, but somehow, some way, that was one of those outliers. Okay. Mm-hmm. And how you parlay 7.5 sacks to a $100 million contract, to me, that's got bust written all over it. All right. And so, and the kid from Kansas City, I mean, I think he's a good player, but, you're looking at highlights. You're not looking at all the games. There's a reason why he was available. But I think overall they did upgrade the defense speed-wise, but speed doesn't mean better. All right. And so I want to see these guys on the field. But I like the Rachaad White pickup. I think the receivers are all average. Okay. I think that's the reason why these guys were available. And I still don't think they have a legitimate number 2 on the roster. And I think that's something they either have to address in the draft or wait and get. I think the receivers that are still out there, even though they're older, I think are better than everybody on this roster except for Terry. So I still think they have work to do. And overall,
well, that's
I
not
give
saying
this a
much.
B-.
That's not saying much. Right? I mean,
what?
To suggest that Diami and Van Jefferson are better than Burks, McCaffrey, and Jalen Lane. I mean, okay, I agree with you.
I agree with you. I'm saying all these guys are average. And Diami Brown, he didn't play until the last 6 or 7 weeks of his last season he was here, and then he went on to Jacksonville.
He played. He
and
just didn't produce at the level. He started to produce over those final 5-6 games.
Yeah, he was a bust. He was deemed a bust up to that point. Yeah. So I still think that they need to do something in the draft to address the two. And
I don't think they're done anywhere, man. I mean, Gary,
I agree.
If David Bailey's there at 7, which I'd be surprised if he is, I don't care what they added in terms of pass rush ability. I think I disagree with you, certainly, in terms of their defensive signings. The Oweh thing, there is a little bit of mystery around that. I'll concede that in terms of the first 5 games in Baltimore after he was a good player for them, not only in 24, but even before that. The guy led the team in forced fumbles over his first 3 seasons. But I loved what I saw of him down the stretch for the Chargers, and he was a dominant player in that playoff game. Dominant in that playoff game.
Yeah, he was playing. Look who he was playing against. He was playing against the kid whose head was
Will Campbell.
Wrapped around.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone was getting sacked against him.
Well, the quarterback held it too long, too. Thanks for the call, Gary. Appreciate it. Bones, go ahead. Who's your favorite number 1 of the 12 new players and the 4 players they've brought back so far over the first week?
Hey, Kevin, thanks for taking my call. Shout out to
Bones.
my homie, Mad Max. Shout out to Little from Southeast. Hey, look, for me, it's the tight end, man. We needed that tight end, man, for Jaden Daniels, man. You know what I'm saying? The tight end is like the biggest signing for me out of all of them, right? And then, for some reason or another, man, when you be doing these calls, man, we always get that fair weather fan always come in somewhere, man, and try to bring a downer to everything, man, that we did for this signing period, man.
Who did that?
Always, it never fails, man. That fair weather fan always pop up from somewhere, man, and try to take away.
Well, I mean, Bones, people have people can share their opinions. It doesn't mean you're fair weathered.
That's true.
Sometimes actually the most critical are also the most passionate of fans. I mean, it's a sign of how passionate you are as a fan that you care enough to be, into it and critical of some of the things they've done. That's fine.
But some of them athletes that he mentioned, them some good athletes, man. They're better than the athletes that we had last season, man. Last season, we ain't had no athletes.
Is for sure.
None at all.
Yeah.
We sure didn't. All right, Kev, my love.
All right,
you,
Bones.
Man. Thanks, man.
See ya. Everybody else on hold, stay there. We'll take more calls, 301-230-0980. So far, 1 week into free agency, because we're coming up on exactly 1 week of free agency, they have added, in terms of since Monday, 16 new players, 12 of which are from other teams. That's number 1 in the league. Their spending is 3rd in the league. Give me your number 1 move since last Monday noon that you like the most, that you're convinced will be one that will make Adam Peters look smart. 301-230-0980. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. One thing about the two running backs, Ford and Rashad White, signed last week and over the weekend. No fumbles last year between the two of them, and Jerome Ford's barely fumbled during his career. Rashad White actually had a bit of an issue his first 3 seasons, but did not put the ball on the ground once last year. So that's good to know. Ford didn't fumble. McNichols is not going to be asked to carry the ball a lot. But remember, Bill Krosky-Merritt had a bit of a fumbling issue there for a few weeks. Who's the number one player on your free agency list so far that you like the most, that you think is going to make this team look really good for having signed that player? As mentioned, 16 players since last Monday at noon, 4 of their own, 12 new players. I like Owe a lot, but I like Chig a lot. I like Chenal a lot. There are a couple of players that I really like. I like the culture that they're bringing with these players, but I love the speed, the athleticism, the length. In some instances, Amenahu's got 36-inch arms. I mean, the dude is a walking deflecting pass guy. He could be the sleeper in this whole group. Let's go to Ivan. Been a while since we've heard from Ivan. What's up?
Hey, Kevin, how you doing, man?
Good.
Hey,
What's
listen,
up,
Kevin,
Ivan?
I'm listening from afar, man. Hey, I don't get a chance to listen live as much as I want to, but I catch the tapes. I'm gonna go. I agree with you as far as new players. It sounds like Owe is going to set the tone for the entire defense. But listening to your callers, Kevin, I'm pumped. It sounds like you're going to have multiple guys on defense that are going to be, moving to the ball. I've got I was going to say, in terms of new signings altogether, I got a sneaky feeling that your defensive coordinator may be the most impactful signing, not just players, but signings.
Okay.
I told you, Kevin, Durante Jones, he sounds like a guy calling into your show saying, how come we don't blitz more? Why are we missing tackles? It sounds like you're going to have multiple guys.
Man, you are pumping up the
ball.
callers today. You're pumping up the callers, saying the callers are getting you all fired up for how many players they've gotten right. And hell, our new defensive coordinator could have been a caller.
Kevin,
usually you're not that generous to the callers.
Kevin, we're going to be plus. That's because I'm not paying attention as much as I should. But I'm listening to your callers. Your callers are pretty knowledgeable. It sounds like you're going to have multiple guys moving to the ball. You're going to be on the plus side, Kevin, on turnovers, it sounds like. And Durante Jones may wind up being the next hot commodity in the entire league. And when's the last time, Kevin, you had somebody say, I'll be excited to watch the defense? And I'm drooling right now, Kevin, a little bit, thinking that you're going to have guys flying into the ball, creating turnovers. I'm pumped right now. And if we can top that off by getting the running back, Jeremiah Love, Kevin, I might come back to D.C. and get season tickets.
No, I know that's not happening because you love your February and January tea times. So that's not happening. I'll talk to you later. Good call, as always. By the way, from my guy, Bobby Trossett, who has, a big Ravens podcast, I asked him just during the break, I said, give me your reason for Owe not working out in Baltimore. He said, had the nickname almost Owe among the fan base, was impactful, but never consistently finished at the quarterback. You know who that sounds like? Is the guy that I sort of comped him to before free agency, Montez Sweat. Athleticism is off the charts, had his best year in 24, yet really struggled the first 6 weeks of 25 leading to the trade. Jesse Minter, unlocked him post-trade and he went nuts. 10.5 sacks, including 3 in the wild card loss. He's going to be extremely motivated in Washington, had a chip on his shoulder leaving Baltimore and didn't feel he was used to his strengths. That from, Bobby Trossett, who does such a great job with his podcasts and all the Raven stuff that he does. Almost Owe. We used to say that, didn't we? Used to say that about Montez Sweat all the time. God, man, that win rate, that pass rush percentage, just if he could finish more. So we'll see. Mark and Chevy Chase. Mark, go ahead.
Kevin, I've been naming 3 players, 2 free agents and 1 in the draft on Facebook, all over social media. 1 was Leo Chanel. I hope I'm saying his name right.
Yep.
2 was Nick Cross. And 3 is, of course, Jeremiah Love. So I'm so happy we got 2 of the 3 players I've been mentioning. I don't know if Jay Love will slip to 7, but I'm very happy with all season. I do want we watch most of these games in the stands, at least the home games, and we're sort of a sarcastic fan base at times. And I will be a little sarcastic and say, are we now a paper giant? Because what I mean by a paper giant is we haven't really seen these off seasons translate into actually good regular season. So hopefully this year will be different, and we'll take these pieces and not become just a paper giant.
All right. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate the call. Yeah, look, I mean, no one's going to look at the additions Washington's made so far and still pick their roster to be one of the best in the NFL. But again, and I said this last hour, and I'll say it for the next, 9 months until opening day. The reason we have a shot next year to have a complete turnaround is A, the design of the league happens all the time. B, we have the most important position on the field covered as long as he's on the field. As long as 5 is on the field for 17 games, or the significant majority of 17 games healthy, that is a massive difference. It would have been a massive difference last year. I mean, there's no way they're a 5-12 team if he plays more than 4 games, complete start to finish. No way. Now, would they have been 12-5? I don't think so. I think they were so bad defensively last year. And then when they lost bodies, especially Dorrance Armstrong, Dietrich Wise, etc., it just got uglier and uglier as the season went along. But it wasn't a good defense from the jump. It may have been a better run-stopping defense in 2024, but just barely. Just barely. Paulie, go ahead.
Big guy, how you doing, man?
What's
Hail
up?
to the
Hail
W. Yeah, piggyback off what you was just saying. I think the roster was so bad all the way around. Even if Jaden played 17, you probably still only looking at 7 to 8 wins. You know what I mean? But it's saying that they did a good job. Well, on paper, it seems like they're doing a good job. I like how the players, they all have similar characteristics, especially on defense.
Yeah.
Seem like attacking. But I'm gonna go with 2. I'm gonna go with 2. One returning player, well, both returning players, man. Chris Paul. When I seen the guy from Arizona sign with Houston for $3 million, I said, "Oh, we got to get Paul." That's the market right there.
Yep,
that's the market.
It became more and more apparent as the week went along.
Right.
He was the one guy that was a potential week 1 guy. And so once it didn't happen, the chances were increasing. I was so glad to see that news. I thought he was a revelation last year for sure.
Right. Nobody jumped out the window on him, so that was good, man. And just the fact that we lost Biotis, I didn't want to have to replace Biotis and Paul, because Paul came in and solidified that line last year. So I actually seen his impact. And then I'm also going to bring De'Ami Brown back. It might not say he's the main number 2 guy, but his skill set of being able to run up the sideline opposite of Terry is going to open things up the same way it opened it up in 24 when he got into the starting lineup at the end of the season.
Sure.
Because of Noah Brown got hurt. And not only saying that, when you have another guy like that can run up the sideline, we don't know what David Blau office is going to be, but he already said 10 targets for Terry. So I can guarantee you're going to see Terry in that slot too. So you got,
you know what? Great point. Great point. I said this, I think the other day on my podcast to somebody. I may have mentioned it to Logan Paulson, but I was like, we're like I said, it looks a little bit like 24 without Zacchaeus and Crowder in the slot. But to your point, and it's a good one. We've seen Terry. I mean, Scott Turner did this. You couldn't stand Scott Turner, but Scott Turner had him in the slot a lot during that. Remember that 4 or 5 game good stretch in 2021 and even in 2022. Right. Terry on a safety, forget about it. So that could be part of the answer.
Had a quarterback.
Yes.
The problem was we didn't have a consistent quarterback.
That's right.
But yeah, man. So those two players coming back, like I've seen their impact on teams. So I'm gonna give the nod to Paul and Brown, and I'm very excited about Chig, man. Athletic tight end.
Too.
You know, I mean, you talking about security blanket and untapped talent, and tight end is always a quarterback's best friend, man. I take it off Big Guy Hill to the W.
Paulie, everybody from the 757. Yeah, that's a good reminder. I know that the idea of, well, who's going to line up in the slot and play from the slot? Well, it could be Terry at times. We don't know with Blau. Plus, I do think there will be a lot more 2 and 3 tight end sets, 12 and 13 personnel. Bobby in Annapolis, finish it off for us. Go ahead.
What's up, Kevin?
What's up, Bobby?
So, not much. I definitely like Sheehan the most. It's kind of a toss-up between him and Owe. Sheehan, I mean, his RAS score is crazy. He's younger. I couldn't watch Bobby Wagner getting torched in pass coverage anymore. That was kind of rough. Luvu's not necessarily like a pass coverage linebacker. It's going to be interesting to see if him and McGee are on the field at the same time or if it's going to be him and Luvu. But, yeah, I just like the fact that we're just getting younger. We're not signing 30-plus-year-old players anymore, and just getting more athletic overall. Definitely a help.
Yeah, athleticism, speed. By the way, all of these players have a little bit of the same makeup profile-wise from a competitive standpoint, high motor, high energy. Lots of them have experience in postseason football. But just defensively, you needed more guys who could run, so you've added that. You needed more guys that could pressure, and you've added that. And I think, by the way, Luvu's 2024 year is more like what we're going to see in 2026. And I think guys like Sheehan and what they're doing up front, Chason, et cetera, will help out on that. Thanks for the call, Bobby. We're going to go NCAA tournament next. By the way, to my guy Rich, who said, are you now canceling Jeremiah Love out now that they've signed 3 running backs in 3 days? No. Rachaad White and Bill, I think, and Ford, it's going to be interesting. McNichols is a backup running back and a special teamer. Nobody's been excluded as a possibility at number 7 based on anything they did in week 1. The only positions we can really exclude are quarterback and maybe left tackle. Talk tournament with Patrick Evans next.
Hey, folks, Jason Horowitz here with an NCAA tournament schedule.
That's the NBA theme, Max.
It is. It was a little bit too late for me to grab the March Madness one. That's my bad.
Yeah, that's all right. All of our college hoops talk on the Team 980 this week and throughout the tournament is presented by Bud Light. Easy to drink, easy to enjoy. Joining me right now is Patrick Stevens. Patrick has been just flat out one of the best at not only covering kind of college sports in the DMV and beyond. To this time of year, he's always been one of the best. Did it for so long as a part of the Washington Post sports section doing brackets. So let me start there. How did you do this year?
The final numbers were, I think it was 48 teams seated exactly right, 67 out of 68 within one line, and all 68 teams inside the field. I didn't think it was a particularly tough year to do this, and you know, I think probably could have done a bit better. But I will point out, I think the one team that was off a bit was Vanderbilt. I had them as a 3, and the committee had them as a 5. And frankly, I don't know if the committee really factored in that victory over Florida on the Saturday afternoon. So that was a little disconcerting. But beyond that, you know, those are kind of what the numbers look like.
Is getting all 68? I mean, I'm sure you've done it before, but there have been years where you've missed out on a couple, right?
Yeah, but I would tell you that when you're doing it over and over and over again, that the seeding is actually the more interesting and challenging part of it than it is just. I mean, because let's face it, you get 31 of them for free,
right?
And you know, I think most people can, in most years, are going to be able to get 63, 64, 65 without too much trouble. And
who had the best argument for being left out?
Nobody had a good argument for being left out. I mean, like let's run through, like, if you're Oklahoma, don't lose 9 games in a row at one point.
Yeah.
If you're Auburn, don't lose 16 games.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you're Texas and SMU, who did get in, but if you've been left out, you know, don't lose 5 of your last 6.
Yeah.
I mean, all of these teams were flawed, and there was a bit of good fortune here that there was really only one team that got nudged out of the field. That was because of Miami, Ohio's loss in the MAC tournament. So, you know, this is a tournament that with no bid snatchers, you're looking at Oklahoma being in the field too.
I think I found your story on this. I might be wrong, but if you don't know the answer to this means you didn't write the story. But I've been saying that if Howard didn't win the MEAC, that it would have been just the 3rd time in 44 years that a team from the true DMV wasn't in the big dance. Did you write about that a few years ago?
I did. So I did that. I believe it was 2018.
Okay.
Was the year where nobody got in. Nobody from, and I was counting in that grouping American, GW, Howard, Georgetown, Maryland, and George Mason.
Right.
And so that was the group of teams that I was looking at. And then that year, at least UMBC got in, so there was somebody sort of regional that was in there.
Right.
And then in 2022, pretty much everybody was back. So that was a year where nobody was around. So it was 18, and I believe it was 2022. That was the year with the coaching change in season at Maryland. That was the year that Georgetown went 0 for the Big East, and nobody else kind of carried the banner either. And then Howard made it, and Maryland bounced back too, but Howard made it the next year as well.
Since I haven't had you on all season long, do you think next year are 2 make or break seasons for Ed Cooley and Buzz Williams?
Well,
tournament or bust.
Well, I think that Buzz Williams would be owed $20 million if after next year. So I think that kind of ends the conversation for Maryland. You know, I do think that there is something to be said for, you know, everybody gets a honeymoon period, right? And, you know, I don't think that honeymoon period lasted through the first full season. So
no, it didn't. Right.
Okay.
Well, you know
I don't
the
think
fan
it lasts.
base like I do. It's not the most patient.
And so, you know, I do have to ask the question, like, if you're middling next year, if you're just around 500 or so or worse, which is obviously on the table based on what we saw this season, like if that's what happens, then you're going to have a lot of people that just check out on you. And by the way, that's a massive problem for Maryland.
No doubt.
Because you basically run the risk of having the exact same thing happen to you as what happened in football starting about 15 years ago.
Yep.
And that becomes the risk of, your football analog to Randy Edsall is Buzz Williams.
Yeah. Now, we both know that basketball is more important to the masses. Yeah. So there would be more willingness to spend and to buy out and to do all of those things for basketball than for football. But you've already seen, look, Patrick, I've said this many times just about our city in particular, where, even with the pro teams that aren't the football team, every other team in this town has become bandwagon. If they're good, there's a massive and very enthusiastic following for it. And if they're not, they get ignored for the most part.
Yeah. And, I think you saw that at Maryland throughout the second half of the season. You're going in and there's a lot of games where, the announced crowd for a conference game, the announced crowd's around 12,000. And if you're in the building, you're looking around and you're saying, are there really more than 8,000 people here? 9,000 people in the building?
Yeah.
And so, you bring up Georgetown, that's a problem that has been very difficult to solve. And there's different reasons there.
Exactly.
For Maryland, it's, you went from having, a really fun, memorable season to the bottom falling out and extremely fair comparisons to the Bob Wade era. Like those were the worst. That was the worst Maryland team since the bookend years of the Bob Wade era. And there's really no conversation on that. As for Georgetown, it's not just that Ed Cooley's first 3 seasons haven't been an immediate turnaround. And I would tell you that, I would throw out year 1 for him because that was a complete mess that you're walking into. But regardless, people want to include that. That's fair. But things had not been good for most of the last decade now. And so to have to try to climb out of that, and you're playing off campus in an arena that's candidly too big, that's a problem. That is an unsolvable problem for Georgetown, regardless. But it's part of the problem. And so, is it a make or break year for Ed Cooley? I mean, Georgetown has a lot of money invested in him too.
Yeah.
So I don't know that next year is completely make or break, but I do know that this was not the season Georgetown thought it was going to have. Right. And while there are some mitigating reasons for that, namely, Vinci Uchuklu's medical issue there that cost him about a month and a half. At the same time, there were some things with that team that didn't work the way that they were supposed to work, whether it was closing out games, whether it was some misses coming out of the portal. I think that there's going to be a great deal of incentivizing going on over there to try to, fix some of those things and not make the same mistakes twice.
Talking to Patrick Stevens. All right. So I want to go back to the field that was unveiled last evening and talk about Miami of Ohio first. Did you think that they'd end up in a first 4 spot? Is that what they deserved?
So whenever anybody's asked me about Miami of Ohio over the last few weeks, I've given the same answer I'm going to give you. The idea of trying to figure out and forecast what the committee is going to do is based on, well, how has the committee treated teams like this in the past? And you tell me, how many 31-1 teams have there been with the second worst non-conference strength of schedule in the country?
Never.
If it's happened, it's been a long, long while, right? Yeah. So there was a wide range of possibilities that I thought the committee could take with them. I thought they could be a 9 seed. I thought they could be the last team in the field. I also thought that there was probably a little bit of a human element there where you're like, are you really going to leave out a team that went 31-1 and deal with the blowback that would come from it? So, I expected to see them in the field somewhere. There has never been a tournament team, or there's never been a team that had more than 28 wins that's been left out. There's never been an eligible team with less than 3 losses that's been left out. So I thought Miami was going to be good to go once they got through a perfect regular season. So for them to be in a play-in game, an hour from home, frankly, a better chance to win against a very underwhelming SMU team that has a good backcourt but has had some health issues there. That's not a bad situation compared to being like a 10 seed playing a 7 right now. So if I'm Miami of Ohio, I certainly think I belong in the field, but I also think overall that there was a wide range of things that could have happened to them, and I wasn't going to profess being surprised by any of those things that would have ultimately happened. And so this, not a shock to me, and I'm okay with it. I also would have been okay with them being like on the 10 line and being sent off to a 7-10 game someplace.
How good is Virginia?
That's a great question that we're still kind of trying to figure out. It's an interesting
That was
thing.
a hell of a game Saturday night. That was a high-quality basketball game.
They played a great game against a Duke team that was down 2 starters.
Yep.
And so they played a lot better against them the second time around than the first time around, which I think is a credit to that coaching staff that they sized some things up, and obviously the absences mattered too. Virginia, the worst thing that they did all year, they did back before Thanksgiving when they lost on a neutral floor to Butler. But I think one of the things that's hurt them is, because of how bloated the ACC is now in terms of the number of teams, they only saw Duke once in the regular season. They only saw Louisville once in the regular season. They only saw North Carolina once in the regular season. They only saw Miami. Well, they did see Miami the second time in the conference tournament. They did not even play Clemson this season. So there's a whole lot of those types of things that you're looking at. I think it was Clemson that they missed. But in any case, I kind of size them up as a team that has checked a lot of boxes, is very worthy of the number 3 seed that they earned. And it should be really fun seeing what they do up in Philadelphia, particularly if they get a matchup with Tennessee in the second round.
Man, they didn't even play Clemson this year. I'm looking at it. You're right. They didn't play Clemson.
Every team has in the ACC had one league team that they didn't play.
You can't avoid it when you have 39 teams in your league. That's why I'm actually I love the Big East round robin, and then you get a third matchup in Madison Square Garden. It just feels like olden times. All right, so let's talk about, before we get to the teams that you like in terms of teams that can win it all, give me a team right now outside the top 4 seeds that you think can be playing on the second weekend.
Second weekend team outside the top 4. Well, I mean, St. John's would be the sort of team you might say.
Yep.
They're a 5. They're playing well. Vanderbilt, remember, they're in a 4-5 situation with Nebraska, which has never won an NCAA tournament game.
Right.
So, can they get out of that McNeese, Nebraska, Troy grouping in Oklahoma City? I think that's certainly possible. How much do you trust North Carolina? How much do you trust Illinois is a great question for those two down in Greenville. So those are a handful of teams that certainly stand out that could pull that off. I'm not overly trusting of most of the teams on the 6 line this year. I will offer up, Purdue just played 4 games in 4 days. Are they a little weary? And how do they deal with that Miami-Missouri winner? Because I do think that team could be a little bit feisty. Missouri, because they'll basically have all the fans behind them there.
Yeah, how do they get, as a 10 seed, get to play in St. Louis?
So one of the things that, I don't know if you've heard about this, but because of some other things going on in the world domestically, there are a limited number of charter planes that are available to the NCAA.
Okay.
And so ultimately, you've seen there's actually not as much of it as I thought there was going to be, but teams that are basically being put in a situation where they can bus rather than fly to destinations. And so Missouri getting to be a 10 seed in St. Louis is a money-saving and a resource-saving item there.
Give me a first-round upset or two. And I don't need 9s over 8s, but a 10 seed or lower.
All right. I happen to think that Central Florida is pretty good.
Yeah.
And that UCLA has had problems coming east consistently here over the last couple of years. So I think that's a game that
you think Mick Cronin's happy about playing in Philly?
I'm sure he's ecstatic, and I'm sure whatever thoughts he has, he'll keep to himself.
Well, is the kid that got hurt for them against Michigan State going to play or not? Because I actually thought they were playing really good basketball at the end of the year.
They were, and that's a perfectly fair question. Don't know the answer to it.
Okay.
On the injury front, Texas Tech kind of muddled home. I think they split their last 6 without JT Toppin. They get Akron in a 5-12 game, and that's a real opportunity, I think, for a surprise. Does Santa Clara knock off Kentucky in a 10-7? I mean, I think that's kind of an interesting game. You look elsewhere. High Point in Wisconsin should be at least a fun game. I don't know if Wisconsin's going to lose that, but it should at least be a somewhat fun game out in Portland.
Isn't Greg Gard, I think he's so underrated. I used to say this about Matt Painter all the time, and then he's had this, great success here over the last, half dozen years. But I think Greg Gard does a phenomenal job at Wisconsin. Does the industry feel that way about him?
So I think the interesting thing about what Greg Gard has done at Wisconsin is, they've reinvented themselves the last couple of years.
They always do.
But to a remarkable
You're talking about
degree.
pace-wise.
I mean, player roster-wise, they reinvent themselves all the time. But they are now, they have gone back to being a super slick, efficient offensive team. But they also play at a pretty decent pace. I think I heard, was it on the selection show last night? It's the highest scoring Wisconsin team since 1971.
Yeah, I mean, and there was a time where it was more deliberate. It was more intentional half court, fewer possessions, the whole thing. But do coaches think that he does a good job? I know that they loved Painter all along, but I don't know what they think about Gard.
I mean, I certainly think that when you look at the results, that for the most part, you have to be respectful of a team that or a coach that keeps winning 20 games every year. And the only year since 2019 that he hasn't done that was the 2021 season, where do you really trust anything with pandemic ball, and place much value in that?
All right, I've got 30 seconds, so give me. How many teams can win this thing, and give me the that list, the teams that you think can?
I mean, I don't know if it's a particularly deep list this year. I mean, Duke, Michigan, Arizona, Florida, Houston, Connecticut, and if you want to argue for Iowa State, maybe. I don't know how much deper it goes than that.
Can you argue Purdue or not?
Man, if they're right like they were this weekend, yeah. I mean, they've got everything you want. But they had that 1.5 month bobble there where you didn't know what you were getting. Can they be consistent enough over the next 6 games, just like they were over the last 4?
Thank you for doing this. Hope you're well. By the way, at D1S Course, at Discourse on X. I hope you're well. Thanks. Talk soon.
Take care.
Patrick Stevens, everybody. Ben Standig next. All right, Ben Standig's with us every Monday, Friday, and sometimes in between at Ben Standig on X, on Twitter. Ben writes a Substack column about this team, covers the team as good as anybody does, and he's also got a podcast by the same name, Last Man Standing. So I'll ask you the question that I asked our callers earlier this hour, and that is, it's now 12 new players since last Monday at this time. 4 players brought back since Monday at this time. There were a couple of additional players brought back prior to free agency beginning. Who's your favorite signing? Who's the one that you feel most confident about?
Boy, well, most confident about? All right, I'll go with one here. I'll go with Nick Cross because, like, I really, you know, I think he's a legit strong safety. If you look at the stats, you know, he's led safeties in a lot of categories against the run, like things like, you know, stopping players for unsuccessful yards or plays made, you know, behind the line of scrimmage. And, you know, the run defense has been problematic for this team, you know, the last 2 years. Not saying everything has been problematic on defense, but, you know, in particular, and if you don't stop the run, it's hard to get much else going. You're in a division, obviously, with Saquon Barkley and others. So, you know, I mean, and plus, like, the money is not that huge. The terms aren't that big. So in terms of, like, sort of a, you know, pound for pound kind of a deal, I think that one, to me, it's not a huge risk, but I think the reward is pretty obvious.
Is anything that has happened so far, does anything that we've seen so far prevent them from doing anything else, or eliminate the possibility of them doing anything else?
Either free agency or the draft?
Both.
Well, I mean, you know, would I expect them to go out and sign sort of another, you know, B, C level receiver? I mean, probably not at this point, right? You've got now.
I'm talking more about the upside. I'm talking more about, does anything take all that's happened over the last week and even before? Will that prevent them from going after Brandon Aiyuk, from going after a pass rusher in the draft, but Caleb Downs, etc.? Any of those guys off the table?
I don't think so.
Yeah,
I mean,
right?
I mean, Caleb Downs would be the one where I'm like, okay, if you know, I think he's best served playing closer to the line of scrimmage in the box. And again, Nick Cross might be that's where he's probably going to live. But even still, like, I don't think that's so prohibitive because it's draft is a long-term deal. So no, I don't think so. I mean, look, they can definitely take a pass rusher because Owe is the only one who's under contract beyond this coming season. Aiyuk, I mean, yeah, I mean, there is no obvious number 2 receiver. So if they view him as that guy, then, you know, the role is there. They have some insurance if it were to blow up. But no, I don't really think there's anything that's happened here that would make you think they can't do, you know, whatever they think is necessary. I mean, obviously, I'm not expecting much in terms of big money expenditures at this point, but yeah, I don't think anything is off the table, even though they've added all these players.
So how did the Chris Paul thing kind of, you know, happen? Was it just that the market wasn't there as he and his agent may have thought it would have been?
Yeah, I'm still trying to sort of piece this together, but yeah, I mean, that seems like the way it went. You know, you can obviously spin it as, hey, he decided he wanted to stay, but when you don't announce the money when the deal gets done, that's a pretty big indicator that this is not anywhere close to where anybody thought. Like, even if it was, like, say, 1 for $8 million, okay, you know, I mean, obviously that's a good money, a huge raise over what he was getting. Maybe it's not the multi-year deal that he thought, but okay, you know, that's good money. But you know, that's curious. I don't know. I mean, sometimes these things are a game of musical chairs, right? That there's only so many teams at any given moment in time who are willing to spend on position X, and he was, you know, if that's the way that it went, he fell short. I mean, it wasn't just, you know, this was coming from a lot of different sources and noises and reports out there that Chris Paul was somebody to keep an eye on. So yeah, it's interesting. I think what's really interesting to me about this one, though, Kevin, is that, okay, so he started the last 15 games, and you would think, okay, well, if he's coming back at a minimum, he's the starter. Not nothing that they would tell him that to feel, but you would think that would be the case. I don't even know definitively if we can say that, because I think that, from an upside perspective, Brandon Coleman's athleticism trumps Chris Paul's power, I would say. And with this new system that they're going to be using with probably a little more zone blocking, where you want a lineman to get up the field a bit. I think that's
athletic,
more Brandon. Yeah, so that's Brandon Coleman. So look, obviously Coleman has to improve. I mean, Paul, was the better guy last year, particularly against the pass. But I just think that's sort of interesting that he's coming back, and yet I don't even know if we can say he's the starter, which would be wild.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I was thinking even about at running back. I think we are in some of these situations in true off-season then training camp competitions. I totally agree with you on Paul, and it has everything to do with what they look like offensively this year. Plus, I think we'll see more 12 and more 13 personnel, which, is sort of drives the wide receiver answer. Not that I think they're going to pass on Aiyuk if he's healthy and if he's sane. But I was thinking about, with respect to Chris Paul, does his return mean you just pencil him in at left guard? I don't think so. I think, they had Coleman as a potential answer. They've got Allegretti if they come up with another center answer. They've got, there's going to be a competition there. They didn't think so highly of him that he was a can't leave guy we have to keep. And then at the running back position, Rachaad White can play, man, and he's an all-around back as a pass catcher, as a pass blocker. I don't think that you pencil in Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt and say that Rachaad White's a third down answer, or, and maybe even Jerome Ford, who's had some good moments in his career. I think it's going to be a battle at running back entering training camp, unless, of course, they take Jeremiah Love. So, yeah, I think there's going to be some interesting training camp battles. I think we've got more clarity, believe it or not, on defense with all the new players. Do you agree or not?
Yeah, well, on the running back front, I mean, I think Bill's the early down guy and Rachaad White is the pass catching guy. The question is, how often do they, what are the reps breakdown like? But I think their roles seem pretty apparent. So if we're going to go quote unquote starter, who's in on first down, then I would say that's going to still be Bill, for the most part. But yeah, I mean, I think that one is, like I said, it's more of a role thing than it is definitive volume.
Rachaad White can be your lead back. I mean, he's certainly been that in Tampa. He hasn't been just a third down back.
Yeah, but I'm saying Bill's not a third down back. So you know what I mean? If they're both going to be used together, then Rachaad White, unless Rachaad White's all of a sudden becoming the dominant ball carrier.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's possible that he just wins it out and he's a better first down option. This is a guy that's had some really good moments in his career.
I'd be surprised if that happens. But, look, anything is possible when Bill only has 1 year of tape. It's not like he's, a grizzled vet and, we'll see. But, I mean, look, I think Rachaad White, he was out there on the street for a long time. People weren't viewing him in that space. So I think, I would think he's being viewed as, at best, the tag team with Bill, and at worst, the pass catcher when you need on the third down play. I would be surprised if he's the starter. But the point is that he can be the guy, whether it's because of injury or something's not working, or he's a better fit in a certain matchup. Sure, all that is true. I agree with that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my point is Rachaad White is not Kenneth Gainwell. If they had signed Kenneth Gainwell, I would have said, well, that's your third down back. Whereas Rachaad White has been a lead back. He's been your first down back, throughout his career at times. So if you get to training camp and if it becomes, hey, man, he's just more advanced, he's more mature, he's more experienced, and he's every bit here's what he isn't compared to Krosky-Merritt. And I think we saw this in the Dallas Christmas Day game. He's not the home run threat that Bill is. But he's the inside the tackles runner that Krosky-Merritt is, every bit of it. But anyway, yeah, we'll see. Defensively, I just noticed you put up your first depth chart of the year. This is an early depth chart, projected depth chart on defense. So tell me where, and I'm looking at it right now. Give me, because I think this is interesting because we don't really know what the defense will look like. So tell me how you went about this process and what you landed on.
Yeah, I mean, it was more just to see, like, okay, let's look at the basics in terms of, like, where they have. Like, you know, like, even if, like, defensive line, like, if Dorrance Armstrong is healthy, I don't know that he's not starting week 1 over Kayvon Sheehan, but we'll see how that goes. But it was more just to see, like, where do they still need some bodies. You know, I think corner is a pretty obvious one, linebacker depth potentially as well. But yeah, I mean, I kind of looked at it more like, you know, in the 4-3, just because I still don't quite know what the 3-4 means. I mean, if Tim Settle is going to play some nose, does that mean he's quote unquote starting, or you know? So we'll see on that. But I kind of just looked at it like, you know, I think it's more like this actually. The front seven is kind of like, who are the front seven, and then if it's 3-4, you know, you drop Owade back to an edge linebacker, and then if it's 4-3, you know, he goes forward. So I just more or less had that. I think Jordan McGee is the question still there. I mean, right now there's either he's the starter and there's, you know, no obvious competition, or they're still waiting to possibly add somebody to compete. If not, maybe even flat out be the guy who wears the green dot and calls out the signals. But right now,
who is the green dot guy? Is it Sheehan to start? Are we?
No, it's McGee as far as I know, based on the current. My sense is Sheehan is not a green dot guy.
Okay, so Jordan McGee would be that guy. So Luvu, Sheehan, and Jordan McGee, you're projecting to be in the starting lineup.
Yeah, like I said, I think the front seven, or you know, the front seven with Dorrance Armstrong, you know, sort of as part of that, as the eighth guy, but part of that, I think to me looks kind of apparent. You know, with the new guys, Chason and Owe, outside of Payne, and Kinlaw per se, and then the linebackers, like you just said, and then it's just a matter of, you know, whether you're going to go 3-4 and move one of the defensive ends back, and obviously, you know, Tim Settle will play and Johnny Newton and all that stuff, but yeah, I think to me I think the front seven looks pretty set. Again, with the question being, is Jordan McGee actually going to be the guy come week 1?
Are you pretty confident that Bobby Wagner is not coming back?
I mean, look, obviously there's been a lot of, you know, reversals here. Like it looked like Chris Paul was going to be gone, and then all of a sudden he came back. So, you know, you can never say never. He's still out there. And like I said, they haven't even added like a backup, you know, middle linebacker type. So I wouldn't rule out anything at this point. And like, I do think that Bobby Wagner, if the goal is to use him moving forward, meaning, you know, attack the line of scrimmage, you know, seek out the play and attack the line, not drop him into coverage, then yeah, I think there's still some sense that could make sense. But once they moved away from Dan Quinn's system to somebody else's, I just kind of figured, all right, this is probably it for him. It's not surprising that he's still out there in that, you know, he's not a guy that teams are going to feel they have to rush out to sign immediately. They can kind of wait and see what the market is. He's not going to be a fit for everyone in this day and age because of the possible concerns in coverage. But yeah, I don't roll it out. Like I said, this is one of my frustrations at the end of the year. We didn't see Jordan McGee play, and they can tell me whatever they want about practice and this, that, and the other, but you know, real games are different, and they didn't do it. So it's hard to know what they think he is, and you know, in terms of being that guy. And you know, we'll see. I mean, I would be surprised, I guess, at this point, but until they add somebody else, I'm certainly not going to close the door.
I'm talking to Ben Standing, of course. You kind of mentioned from early on, right, that Dyami Brown's return was a possibility. So, I mean, first of all, the fact that he basically was, I mean, shelved for the last 8-9 games of Jacksonville's season. I mean, he was inactive twice, including in the playoff game. He had one catch over the final 8 games of the season. The $10 million he got last year clearly was, yeah, thanks, but no thanks from our team. But they liked the player. And so getting him back 1 year, $3 million, just the Dyami Brown 1 year saga, do you think it makes Adam Peters look pretty sharp or not?
Yeah, you know, for all the lamenting about letting
De'Ami Brown and Zacchaeus go last year, you know, we've talked about this before. It's not that they let those individual guys go. It's that they didn't replace them with comparable talents. And then when the injury struck, you know, they just didn't have enough depth. But also, in terms of De'Ami Brown specifically, they didn't have his skill set, which was run straight towards the other team's goal line, and Jaden's going to throw you the ball. And obviously that worked very well. And it even went to another level in the playoffs, which is where he obviously went from being a guy that, you know, had been a pretty disappointing career to getting a $10 million contract from Jacksonville. So, yeah, I mean, it never made sense that you were going to spend that kind of money on him. But, you know, again, the whole point was that skill set is still needed. He already fits it. And the other thing with De'Ami Brown, I remember, you know, when the new staff got here in 2024, and we're like, okay, well, what are they going to say about, you know, we know what they'll say about like Terry McLaurin or Deron Payne, but what are they going to say about some more of these fringe guys? And De'Ami Brown had been a pretty, you know, underwhelming player to that point. And Dan Quinn like immediately started praising De'Ami Brown, not because of, you know, catching bombs or anything, but just because of his attitude, his demeanor, his willingness to block, play special teams, all those kinds of things. And he you know, signaling him out like that said to me, okay, he's getting in Dan Quinn's radar for things beyond what he's actually here to do. And then obviously he blew up. So I just think De'Ami Brown coming back just made all the sense in the world, especially when they're in the position they are in now, which is because they don't have an obvious number two at the moment. You at least then need guys who can fill specific roles, i.e., be the guy that takes it over, you know, over the top on the defense, and De'Ami can obviously do that.
All right. So what's next? Do you have any hunches? Do you have any? I mean, we've talked about Aiyuk until we're blue in the face. I mean, right now, percent chance that Aiyuk's on this roster.
No, I can't even give you one, dude. I mean, I don't even.
Of course, you can. You're choosing not to.
I really can't. Like, I mean, if I say any direction, like it suggests I would know. I don't think anybody knows anything what's going on with Brandon Aiyuk.
Well, then
I mean,
say 50-50.
Okay, that's sure. I mean, I don't even know.
It's not an 8-8 cop out on a season record. It's what you think. You're not sure, but I would put it at higher. I would put it at 55-45 or 60-40.
Yeah, I mean, all the evidence, like in terms of whether they should or shouldn't, screams they shouldn't. The evidence that there's literally no other rumors out there. There's no other conversations that we're hearing that he could be a target for any other team. Is, you know, it seems like it's okay. It's Commanders or bust.
Some of that could be just that the assumption is he's going to be here. But go ahead.
Well, I mean, people in my business will take anything they hear and put it up there to get a click. So if something was out there, somebody would run with it. You know, even to a minor. I mean, there was even something the other day about Travis Kelce might not play for the Chiefs. You know what I mean? Like, come on. So if anybody had anything on
do you think there's a chance he's not in the league next year?
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, there's a chance. Yeah.
I mean, again, the whole thing is weird. As you know, TJ Houshmandzadeh, that video from last week, you know, put it out there like, hey, it's not even so much that he said, here are the cautionary tales and what a team should be worried about, and how a team should sort of deal with it. But like you said, he hasn't even talked to him in weeks, and this is a guy who he is apparently one of his clients, I guess, as a wide receiver coach. You would think that a guy who has not been playing, he didn't play all last year. Like, I'm not saying they have to be in hardcore training in February or March, but you would think there'd be these conversations like, hey, let's meet up on, you know, April 10th. I'll come to your place for a week. We'll do, you know, whatever, something. But to not even have the conversations on top of Kyle Shanahan's
what are you suggesting? That right now in this moment, there may be just like questions about where he is, what he's up to? I mean, by the way, that kind of thing, of course, you're just, sorry, we're not even, there's no interest. But why wouldn't San Francisco have released him by now?
I don't know. I mean, I guess there's some, I don't know if this is an actual report or just the internet, but like some notion of like they think they could maybe still get, you know, a draft pick out of this from Washington. I have no idea how that could possibly happen at this point. So, you know, I don't know.
You wouldn't do that because you then acquire the contract with him.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. I mean, none of it makes any real sense. And that's why, like, the whole, like, just, it's not even, that's what I don't even know if it's like a 50-50. It's more like an NA. I don't even know how to apply standard logic to what we normally discuss in a situation in which we don't even seem to know where the person is.
So, I'm not saying he's like missing, but just like if he's dropped off the radar in terms of like people in his own life, including the guy who used to be his head coach, all that, then like, I don't know what we're talking about. So it's hard to speculate on any level as to what's going on here.
Yeah, well, Dante Whitner, who does a 49ers podcast, suggested with me last week, like he probably needs, a total psychiatric sort of evaluation and might need therapy before you make that call. But there's no way you would do anything but a 1-year prove-it deal. I mean, that's the only way you do anything with him. So back to the question that started the Aiyuk conversation. What do you think's next?
Well, right. I mean, I think center is the big, matzo ball still hanging out there, right? Like, Nick Allegretti, sure, we've had this conversation. They feel comfortable if it needs to go down that route. There are still a couple other guys out there who've been starters in this league. Ethan Potchich, if I'm saying that right, from the Browns. Lloyd Cushenberry, who's been on the Broncos and I think the Titans last year, right?
Titans failed his physical. They cut him on February 25th, which was right around the time that Biotish got cut.
Right. So, something like that could be a pretty, easy maneuver, plug and play, and then you're locked in. That to me would be the biggest thing. Now, again, they need depth at a bunch of other spots and, more size at corner and things like that. And again, the receiver, but I think they've already, they made their play in the receiver market because there wasn't many other plays to make other than possibly the Aiyuk thing. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think there's like a ton of like major stuff left, but the center spot is clearly a big one. And like I said, possibly the Mike linebacker if they're not completely sold to Jordan McGee's that guy.
What about a corner like Trayvon Diggs?
Yeah, I put him down as like in the story you're talking about that I had up with the depth chart. I put in like, okay, what's possibly next? And he checks a lot of boxes. He's a big corner right now. They don't have a lot of size over there.
He's aggressive.
Yeah, he obviously had his best seasons with Dan Quinn in Dallas. He led the league in interceptions. Now, things fell apart the last couple of years with Dallas to the point that they released him last season while they were, still trying to, push for the playoffs and such. So, you got to sort out what's going on there. But, again, if we're talking like a 1-year flyer, that doesn't seem like a bad option if he's all right, physically, mentally, spiritually, all these things. And again, Dan Quinn's going to know this guy just the way we're saying Peters is going to know Brandon Aiyuk. So I think that one does make sense. But yeah, I mean that's just beyond that. Yeah, they need another corner. Ideally, I think someone of size. And this could be at the draft. Like I don't think that's taking a cornerback. Even hypothetically at 7, if they think Mansour Delane from LSU, who seems to be the number 1 corner, if they think he's worthy of me, he's typically going off the board around like 10, so it's not like it's that far removed from 7. So that's even a possibility, I would think. But yeah, I think those are sort of the main spots we're looking at this point.
All right. Anything else that I didn't ask you that you want to talk about?
Plus, we may get a kicker at some point. That's probably way down the line, I would guess.
Well, they're going to add a kicker for camp. It's not going to be Jake Moody solo. More likely than not, could be. Didn't they do that a few years ago? Where they just had one kicker in camp.
Yeah, they've had that a couple times, and it hasn't exactly worked out. I just think it's on to the draft, and it really is funny. I was so excited for free agency, just because it's going to clear up what they're going to do in the draft. At least it'll narrow the field, and I really don't think it did on any level. And I don't think too much got clarified even ahead of them necessarily. So I think it's still a pretty wild board, and I think the general good thing is that other than maybe the offensive linemen that are being projected top 10, almost anybody that's currently mocked, inside, the top 10 would work here in some way, shape, or form. So to that end, they may have preferences, of course, but to that end, like they're not going to lack for options, and then we'll just have to see. I'm not like, they're definitely going to take Carnell Tate because of the receiver situation or Jeremiah Love or what have you. But obviously, you have to think those two guys in particular, the likelihood of them showing up here if available picked up based on how it all played out in free agency. But I think that's going to be the interesting part. And also, I think the good thing is here, like if they were able to trade down a couple of spots, again, I still think they'd be in position based on how things look that they'll still get somebody that like they won't like drop down
unless they drop down like 10 spots, but they won't drop down enough that will take them out of the range of somebody that they would want. I think they're in a pretty good shape even if they do that.
All right. Thanks. Talk to you later.
Always, man. See ya.
Ben Standing, everybody. There's actually been, I wouldn't call it a massive trade in the NFL, but an interesting one. We'll update you on that when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. So in the event that Patrick Mahomes isn't ready for the season, the Jets have traded Justin Fields to the Chiefs for a 6th-round pick. Justin Fields may be the starting quarterback for the Chiefs when the season opens in September. Man, he was terrible with the Jets last year. I kind of was a Justin Fields guy coming out and thought there was a chance for him. And even there were moments in Chicago, but God, was he terrible last year. That's not my what do you got. I should have thrown to the what do you got. I've got 2 what do you gots today. Number one is I want to recommend a story that was written by Stephen Noe at the Sporting News on Russell Westbrook. It's titled The Hidden Side of Russell Westbrook, NBA's Most Hostile Interview is Also Its Kindest Teammate. The reason this was interesting to me is that when he was in Washington a few years ago for that one season when Tommy Shepard was the GM, I remember having a conversation with Tommy one day, not on the air, but off of it. And he said, do you know who the best teammate on this team is? And I'm like, no, who? And he said, Russell Westbrook. Really? Russell Westbrook. This story written by Stephen Noe talks about Russell Westbrook in a way that I don't think most sports fans, and certainly not most NBA fans, realize. He has always been incredibly antagonistic with the media. By the way, his play on the court, he's a 2-time MVP, but his play on the court, even I was the biggest Russell Westbrook fan for so long and would root for him every year to get it done in the postseason. And then I came to the conclusion that he just can't slow down enough when the games slow down in May and June. He's got this one speed, it's 120 miles per hour, and he just can't slow down. And the playoffs favor the players that can execute and can produce when the game slows down to a half-court game in the most meaningful of playoff games and in the most meaningful moments of playoff games. And that just isn't Russ's game. With that said, his kind of ongoing war with the media, and that's written about in this story, is so not what he is as a teammate and a person. There's so many quotes in here about Russell Westbrook from former teammates. Clint Capella, who played with him, I guess, in Houston for a period of time, said Russell Westbrook is, quote, the most genuine superstar I've ever played with, closed quote. Very happy person, very nice person, always smiling, always joking around. I was like, wow, I never thought a superstar could also be that great of a guy, closed quote. There's a player called Alex Abrines. He played with Westbrook at one point, was not a significant player, but he was in Oklahoma City with Westbrook. And he said that he was really struggling in his first year with loneliness. He was lonely and he was depressed. And he said, Russell Westbrook was the player that was, quote, incredibly kind to me. When I wanted to quit, he took me out to dinner. It was great. He said he's just real. He's a real person, closed quote. DeAndre Jordan recruited Westbrook to the Nuggets last year. Remember, he played with Jokic. I remember saying, how's that going to work? Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic, and Russell Westbrook? DeAndre Jordan said that he's known Russ for 20 years, and he calls him, quote, one of the most interesting guys in the league, one of the most caring guys in the league. He always took interest in younger, undrafted players, younger players who were struggling, paid for dinner, got clothes for guys, and he became a guy that young players always looked up to, close quote. Apparently, he's incredibly generous as a tipper. During the COVID bubble, he tipped housekeeping $8,000 at the end. And he does all kinds of charity work that he never, according to this story, seeks credit for. Fred Katz, who covered him in Washington for The Athletic, said, Russ does nice stuff, but he covers up his nice stuff. and then letting his not nice stuff be not be covered up. It's a strange dynamic. So he lets his antagonistic, almost at times combative relationship with the media, he highlights that and doesn't highlight all of the charitable work he does. He's a regular in children's hospitals, once surprising a 13-year-old quadriplegic boy in order to fulfill his Christmas wish. It's actually a really, really interesting story about a guy that I do remember Tommy Shepard telling me when he was the GM here briefly, after Ernie and before Will Dawkins. He said the most respected and most well-liked guy on our team is Russell Westbrook. Who knew? I mean, I did because of that, but I didn't know that it was a league-wide thing. I don't know if there's ever been a player in my lifetime of watching the NBA that has tried harder than Russell Westbrook. The intensity in which he plays with has always been what's attracted me to him as a player. But there is a level of that he's never able to dial back, and it's hurt him in the postseason. There's no doubt about it. It has. He's also looked straight crazy at times. But behind that, apparently one of the most generous and one of the most beloved players in the game by his teammates and coaches. There's lots of stuff in here from his coaches as well. Definitely worth reading. I'll retweet this story at Kevin Sheehan DC after the show. But it's called The Hidden Side of Russell Westbrook, and the NBA's most hostile interview is also its kindest teammate. Love the story. The other what do you got is, so according to our good friend John Orand at Puck News, the NFL is trying to package up and sell to networks another, standalone 4 to 5 game package for this upcoming season. They are currently in negotiations with CBS for that next package, which could result in like $3 to $4 billion. But this one could result into according to John, $500 million to $1 billion for a 4 to 5 game package, which would include the opener in Melbourne. And I say the opener because it may be played on Wednesday before Seattle hosts the typical league opener on Thursday Night Football. And that is September, I forget what day it is, September 7th or 8th, something like that. But I think I've mentioned before that the possibility existed that this game between the 49ers and the Rams next year may be the game that kicks off the season on a Wednesday night, and then Seattle would play Thursday night. So they're trying to package up, the NFL is, 4 to 5, maybe 6 games in a $500 million to $1 billion in new revenue package, which would include this game, then the Thanksgiving Eve game, which was reported last week. That would be a part of this package as well. The Wednesday night before Thanksgiving, having a game. And then if you look at the calendar for this year, so Christmas Eve is on a Thursday this year. There will undoubtedly be Christmas Day games on a Friday, but that'll likely be Netflix again on Christmas Day. But the Christmas Eve Thursday package could be more than just one game on Christmas Eve. And that may be, an Amazon game or may not be. And then they're also talking about potentially a Christmas Eve game on Wednesday of that week. So stay tuned, because the NFL can't get enough when it comes to their product and coming up with creative ways to sell their product. Melbourne, Thanksgiving Eve, Christmas Eve, and maybe Christmas Eve. A package of maybe 4 to 5, maybe 6 additional games that the NFL will sell for the upcoming season for like $1 billion. We'll have John on the show at some point to talk about all of that. All right, some NCAA tournament bracket discussion when we return. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. This from Darren in Baltimore. Darren writes, Kevin, you once said Maryland basketball should be in the tournament 4 out of every 5 years. What happens next year if they don't make it? If they don't make it next year, I think there will be a coaching change after next year. That's what I think. Yeah, I mean, what I've said before about Maryland basketball, and I think this is realistic. I think there are some that get very unrealistic about what Maryland basketball is or should be. This is, to me, what's realistic. I think out of every 5-year period, they should be in the tournament no less than 4 out of 5 years. That's where Mark Turgeon basically had the program. They'd gone for 6 out of a 7-year stretch. Willard went 2 out of 3 years. So, yeah, I mean, a 4 out of 5 year stretch is not, outlandish, especially with a 68-team field, soft bubbles. It's seemingly every year. So I think they should be a 4 out of 5 year tournament team. I think in 2 of those 5 years or 2 of those 4 years, they should be a legitimate, top 10, top 15 team where they are competing for the second weekend of the tournament and a chance to go to the Final Four. And I think 1 out of every 5 years at a place like Maryland, you should be a legitimate contender for the Final Four. That's what I think Maryland basketball should be. I'm not putting it in the Kansas, Duke, Carolina, Kentucky, UConn category of, if they don't make the Final Four, they're disappointed, or if they don't make the Elite Eight, they're disappointed. There was a time, certainly when Gary was here, where it's like the Sweet 16 was not enough. It just wasn't. And eventually, they were a Final Four team, and then they won the national championship. And then it was a long time in between trips. Well, actually, the year after their national championship year, they went to the Sweet 16. And then there was like a 10-year stretch, or maybe even longer, in between Sweet 16 trips. But that's what I think it should be. Every 5 years, you're in the tournament 4 out of the 5. And by the way, the 5th year that you're not in it, you got to be on the bubble. And that's really what Maryland basketball's been for my lifetime. They've either been in the tournament or they've been fighting over the last few weeks, maybe even into the conference tournament, to get in it, and maybe they fell a little bit short without getting that one additional win. That must have happened 5 or 6 times over the last 20-something years. You can't lose 21 games in that 5th season where you don't make the tournament. That's not really something that's happened, except for the Bob Wade, period following Lefty and before Gary. He did go 9-20 one year. In his final year, they were terrible, even though they pulled off an upset of the number 1 seed NC State in the ACC tournament. People thought for a moment, oops, that might save his job. No, it didn't. That's what I think it is. I don't think that's unreasonable. They have the budget for that. They're in the conference for that. From a salary cap standpoint, they've got the commitment to that. They have an AD now who gets it, smart, understands what that particular sport means to the school, means to the students, means to the alums, means to the biggest donors, means to the area, quite frankly. Yeah, I'm not saying they should be in the Final Four, or a Final Four contender every year. I don't think that. 4 out of 5 years tournament. And 2 of those 5, you're in the second weekend, and 1 of those 5, you're a legitimate Final Four contender. The area says it. The tradition says it. The league says that that's what they should be. The money available says that's what they should be. Yeah, they've got enough money from an NIL standpoint, and certainly from the Big Ten salary cap standpoint, the 20.5 cut that basketball gets. I am not as fired up for this upcoming tournament as I've been, but I will get to that point starting tomorrow. I will have smell test picks. The smell test for the tournament, I don't think is lost at all since I've done it. I'll update you on those numbers. I'm pretty sure we smoked it last year and the year before. So we will do smell test picks starting tomorrow if there's a game tomorrow night of the 2 or on Wednesday night. But certainly there will be games for Thursday, Friday, and beyond. All right, that's it for the show today. Back tomorrow. Chris is next. Stay safe.